Back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, July 29th, 2020, and today I'm going to be discussing whether or not Joe Biden's lead is narrowing up. So we're looking at an electoral college map where we have a number of swing states, states that are absolutely going to be competitive in this general election. And Joe Biden has pretty much been leading in almost all of them. Out of all of the states on your screen, I think he doesn't lead in maybe Iowa, and now he leads in Texas. I think the only states he's underwater in are in Iowa and Georgia at this point in time out of all of the purple states and districts on your screen. However, we have seen some recent data that just came out from Change Research and CNBC that has pretty much given us a little bit better of an idea of what these swing states are trending like. We're looking at swing states narrow up nationwide despite Biden's lead stay consistent nationally. And I don't necessarily think that this Change Research poll or these Change Research polls in general, they're C-minus pollsters. I don't think they should be weighted as heavily as other pollsters that go in here and that have much better ratings from 538. But I will say that it is a little bit of a warning sign for the Biden campaign that their numbers are narrowing up. I never really expected Biden to maintain a lead of leading in almost all of these states through the general election, but he should be doing pretty well. Nationwide, his numbers haven't really fluctuated over the past month. I mean, it's gone down from a 10-point lead down to an 8-point lead, but that 10-point lead was around Biden's, imaginary convention bump, because that was one of the largest margins of victories that would have been expected if the election had been held in early July. So Biden leads by roughly 8.2% nationwide, and this same Change Research poll shows him up 9% nationwide. So what's different about the nationwide versus statewide polls? Well, first things first, I do think that the states are narrowly narrowing up. I know that's really weird to say, but I do think that's true. I don't think we're seeing single-digit, or at least not single-digit, but lean characterizations in states such as Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. We're probably going to see a 6, 7, 8-point spread as we do on the overall average in these states, which I think is way more consistent with what we're seeing statewide rather than a 4-point lead in Pennsylvania. There's a 7-point lead for Biden in Pennsylvania. Let's check out Wisconsin. Right here, it's a 7-point lead as well, and I think Michigan actually might be 8 or 7. It really all depends, but that poll probably brought it down. Yeah, so it's 8% statewide. So for Biden to be up 4% doesn't really match the overall average. So that definitely can be viewed as an outlier, and a 4-point margin of victory in a state Trump carried 4 years ago isn't the worst thing either. But I will say that is not necessarily in character for the state of Michigan, considering that Trump recently, today, actually withdrew some ads from that state, which we need to discuss as well, because that is super important. We're seeing very similar 2008 type of Republican pushes away from, number one, the candidate, and also panicking in certain states that were previously competitive. So outside of these states, I wouldn't necessarily think any of these polls end up with bad news for the Biden campaign. A 3-point lead in North Carolina, that's perfectly fine for them. A 3-point lead in Florida, a 2-point lead in Arizona. These, though Florida doesn't really match the average, I will say that still leading in these states are not crucial for Biden to win the election. He can very well win the election without them entirely. So for him to be leading there is a very good sign. And I will say that these Change Research polls definitely shouldn't be taken too seriously, but they may indicate Biden's narrowing up in the race. But that's not exactly going to be the death of his campaign by any means. He still decimates Donald Trump in almost every single swing state, and I mean almost every single swing state. If we take a look at all the morning consult polls, all we see in July is Biden. Plus, the only state he's ahead in by morning consult is Ohio, and I think that's it. Ohio, and he's even in North Carolina. Outside of that, he's losing in Wisconsin, Virginia, Texas, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Michigan, Georgia, Florida, Colorado, Arizona. So those are all pretty good ratings pretty good numbers for the Biden campaign, and they pretty much match up with a lot of the average. Even Texas has somehow moved further leftward than the past couple of weeks, which has shown Biden ahead by 1 percentage point statewide. That's insane. It's Texas. It shouldn't have been super competitive this time around. Biden should never have been leading, and now he's ahead in this state. So I do see some of the states narrowing up per se. I think that the margins probably won't be 10%. In some of these swing states, we probably won't see a 7-point margin of victory, which is what we currently have in Florida and what we currently have in the Rust Belt. We definitely could see Michigan be a likely state. Pennsylvania and Wisconsin could be a likely state if the election was held today, but I do expect it to narrow up. I expect a lot of these states to narrow up as well, despite Biden leading in Iowa and Ohio polls and Trump leading in some of them. I almost always give Ohio and Iowa to the Trump campaign. Same thing with Georgia and Texas. Despite Biden doing fairly well in recent polls, I do expect Trump to end up winning those states at the end of the day. And also the competitive nature about Maine's 2nd district. I typically land it in the Republican column. However, it is competitive and Biden absolutely could carry it. But when we're looking at this electoral map, it was undoubtedly going to narrow up, and it isn't even really narrowing up that much. We're seeing Biden's numbers go down just a little bit in some of these Rust Belt states as a result of some of these recent polls that have been released, but they aren't shifting too much. I think there's a 1 or 2 cent shift, and overall on the national average, Biden actually went up by 1%. So people start to discuss whether or not the national average matters, but considering that Biden is outperforming Clinton by 5% on the national average and outperforming, the Pennsylvania margin from 2016 by 5% and outperforming Wisconsin by 6%, when we're looking at a lot of these polls, well, they end up with good news for Biden. He's pretty much outperforming on the overall average way more than what he should be based off the adjusted national. He's leading by 8%. Hillary Clinton only led by 3% and only ended up winning by 2% nationwide. So there was only about a nationwide 1% difference between the Trump expected vote and the Trump actual vote, which actually is pretty bad news for President Trump. Because for him to be, at this point in time, at 41.7%, you add 1%, what is that? 43%? You add 2%? 44% for an incumbent president? Biden is 0.1 away from a majority. Okay, 0.11 or 0.1001, whatever. Once he gets over that 50% mark, he has the majority of Americans on his side. 49.9% of them have said, we're already voting for Joe Biden. In 2016, it was only around 45% of those voters that said they were voting for Hillary Clinton. The rest were either voting for Gary Johnson or Jill Stein or obviously Donald Trump. So for Biden to be at this good of a point, this, close up to the election, well, yes, the race probably is narrowing up in these statewide races, but it really won't matter. When I say narrowing up, he's losing maybe 1-2%, which makes sense. He was on one of his highest points. He's leading in Texas on the average. He's leading in actually, let's just visualize it. Let's go ahead and actually fill out this map in the states that Biden is currently leading in. Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, New Hampshire. Now let's go ahead and check really quickly to see how, whether or not Iowa has changed. I know Nebraska's 2nd district Biden leads in, so it's 169 electoral votes already. In Iowa, Trump leads. Let's check Ohio. Actually, Trump leads now. I guess it's fairly recent. Trump leads in Iowa and Ohio. I'll correct that. And I believe he leads in Georgia. If he doesn't, then that's really bad news. But he should be leading, yeah. A 1.2% lead. And then I don't know if they have any data from Maine's 2nd congressional district. I think they actually just released some from public policy polling. Yeah, they do. Maine's 2nd. Oh, that's not it. No, it's from Colby College. Biden +3. Okay, that's fine. We're going to go ahead and characterize that 2nd district for Biden. So based off all of the data that we have right now, they very well could be tightening, and they are in a sense. When I say tightening, I literally mean tightening by 1-2%, which doesn't make much of a difference. The only states that are really within 1-2% right now, Texas. Outside of that, all of these are 2-3 point margins. And even if they do narrow up, it's going to be still difficult for Trump. I mean, Biden's up 7% in Florida. He's up 7% across the Rust Belt. He's up double digits in Colorado, in Nevada, in Minnesota, in Virginia, which I didn't even classify as a swing state. I probably should have, but add that on to Biden's column. He's at 145. Trump's at 78. If you add in all the other Democratic states, there's no contest. Biden absolutely wins the election, without a doubt. There's nothing really competitive about that race if this is the map, because we're seeing numbers. That's not even accounting for the fact that Biden could very well flip Iowa or Ohio or Georgia or Texas. And yes, states are narrowing up. They are getting closer by 1-2%, but that really only made the difference on the average polling numbers in Texas. Texas right now, Biden's leading. It's only Republican because I was discussing these states moving down 1-2% in favor of Vice President Biden, and that only flips Texas because the rest of these states are so far to the left at this point that yes, they could very well be narrowing up. But it doesn't matter because Biden is still likely to win them anyway, which puts President Trump at a very difficult position entering into November. So with Trump down 8% nationwide and down in virtually every single swing state, except for Iowa, Ohio, and Georgia. Biden's up in Texas if you skip to the end and you didn't see. That puts Biden at a very good position entering into this election because Biden could practically lose a number of swing states and not care. We know he only needs the Rust Belt. He only needs these 3 states and Hillary Clinton states from 2016. That shouldn't be a problem. The problem is Biden wants to enter into the White House with a mandate. He wants to enter in with a progressive type policy going in and being a one-in-a-lifetime candidate or one-in-a-lifetime president, very similar to President Obama. So Biden needs a huge electoral college advantage. And if he outperforms Obama's margins from 2008 and 2012, that's going to be one for the history books as well. Because Trump is the incumbent president. That should not be the margin whatsoever. And Biden is currently leading in almost every single state Trump carried just 4 years ago out of the swing states. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the video on your screen and then a playlist for my 2020 election nights. On your screen also at the bottom left, there is the Instagram and Twitter. You can go ahead and check those out. I'm actually going to start using the Twitter today, so that's pretty cool. You can go ahead and follow it if you'd like. I think we're close to maybe 1,300 followers on Instagram, so that's pretty cool as well. Again, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all later today.